So, how? Perfect. This is our overview. This is what we are going to talk about. I'll give you a very short summary, just a refresher. You've just heard it all, but just a little refreshing of your memory. Then we'll jump into the theoretical foundations by Astou, then some eco-innovation measurement by Marceau, and I will talk about results and policy implications, how you already teased, and then we'll have our discussion. So, yeah, we heard a lot about effects of eco-innovations on employment. Firstly, the whole paper was how eco-innovations impact job quality and quantity, all using French data, so it's all the French use case. Then the results were that eco and non-eco innovations both boost employment, but this mainly concerns stable, open-ended position and mostly benefits the high-skilled workers and do not extend to senior workers or women. And then also we have the problem with low-skilled workers, and we added quotation marks, but I'll explain later why. They face a relative wage penalty from eco-innovation. So yeah, this is our starting points, and let's dive in.
Thank you. So I'll present you the theoretical foundation, so our contribution about that. So first of all, what is eco-innovation? Well, this paper treats eco-innovation as a homogeneous concept, whereas the literature shows that it is defined in very heterogeneous ways. INSEE makes an outcome-based definition of eco-innovation and sees it as an innovation that results in a reduction of environmental impact, whether or not that reduction was the primary objective of the innovation. This definition doesn't distinguish between the nature of the innovation itself. It solely focuses on the observed environmental outcomes. By contrast, Rennings, in his book, defines it as all measures of relevant actors which developed new ideas, behaviors, products, and processes, and apply or introduce them, which contribute to a reduction of environmental burdens or to ecologically specified sustainability targets. This heterogeneity is further emphasized in the UNU-MERIT report, Typology of Eco-Innovation, which shows that eco-innovation includes a wide spectrum of activities ranging from environmental technologies and products or process innovations to organizational eco-innovations and system-level transformations. This report highlights that different types of eco-innovation operate through different mechanisms and should not be treated as a single uniform category. It's further emphasized in this graph. You can see that inside the environmental technologies, we have two types, integrated and additive, and it depends on what it does. In the additive one, it treats it doesn't treat it inside the production, but at the end, it's all about recycling and waste disposal. And here in the integrated, you have, for example, the one that tackles the inputs of the production processes. For example, they substitute the primary inputs of the production. There is also the one that tackles the production processes and output of the production process. All of this is important, but and it raises an important question. What counts as an eco-innovation? Is it the products and processes, or does it include organizational change and social practices? The CISSE survey adopts the INSEE definition, but this definition is a bit too narrow and only observes the environmental outcomes. While this approach facilitates measurements, it overlooks the diversity of eco-innovation. This limitation is discussed further by Kiefer and al. In 2019. Indeed, they show empirically that eco-innovations differ along 5 distinct types that involve very different degrees of organizational change, technological rupture, and cooperation, and therefore, as a result, are likely to have distinct and potentially unequal effects on labor demand. Next, what is job quality? Well, the paper views job quality through two measurable indicators, employment and wages. These are very important variables, but we worry that it is incomplete and undermines the role of eco-innovations on employment. Indeed, job quality is multidimensional. As ILO states it, it includes good working conditions, as in tenable work intensity, minimal exposure to physical and psychosocial risks, access to training and reskilling, career processes and prospects, and mobility. It is important to consider these variables because the implementation of eco-innovation may increase, for example, the work intensity or diminish career prospects and mobility, or even switch the risks to the workers. This, even with good wages and labor security, will degrade job quality, and here again a bias may be introduced. Next, what is just transition? The paper uses the definition of the ILO. So a just transition promotes environmentally sustainable economies in a way that is inclusive by creating decent work opportunities, reducing inequality, and by leaving no one behind. In practice, it is implied in the analysis that sufficient job creation, job stability, wages, and distributive effects among different social groups should lead to just transition. This interpretation for us remains a bit incomplete because in the just transition literature, leaving no one behind includes the protection and support of vulnerable workers, particularly those who are displaced and excluded from employment as a result of the implementation of eco-innovation. Unfortunately, here what is interpreted in the is that just transition exists only among those who remain employed. Moreover, another view is not taken into consideration. The paper implicitly relies on a conception of just transition that reflects labor market institutions typical of global north economies. But what about the global south, where the concept of just transition is way more challenged? So finally, this is my last slide. Are eco-innovations really key drivers for the transition? The idea that eco-innovations are the main drivers of the transition is treated in the paper as central. Indeed, it is assumed that the implementation and diffusion of eco-innovations is enough to achieve the ecological transition. This view kind of reflects a green growth transition ideology where environmental pressures are reduced through new technologies. The problem is that this was not empirically proven within the paper, and I have a question. Will eco-innovations lead us to an ecological transition and relieve us from all the environmental burdens we face, or will it actually worsen the situation? That was not said. As a result, the interpretation of positive employment effects critically depends on an untested argument that eco-innovation is indeed the main driver of a sustainable transition. If this does not hold, employment gains associated with eco-innovations may reflect the reinforcement of existing production structures rather than progress toward ecological transition. And now Elu will present, Marceau will present us the methodology.
Hello. So I'm going to talk about eco-innovation measures. My German fellows will be happy about this. And here also I took some pictures of Google image of what eco-innovation means, which is kind of really broad and kind of abstract also. Please. So I'm mainly going to kind of criticize the CISSE database and your use of it, but more in a critical and debated way. So here you have what the CISSE survey looks like. So it's in French, not sorry for you. but it's really simple. It's really, are you improving, are you implementing innovations on the product sides or on the process sides? And is like the reduction in material, for example, or CO2 emission or fossil fuel use significant or not? So that's what you say, Antoine, which is declarative. So I'm going to come back to this point later, but for me it kind of poses some problems. But never mind. Like in the paper, you don't make any distinction between the different, because this is all the information you had in the survey. Unfortunately, this is like privatized data. I try to look at the database, a bit nerdy, but I could not access it, so I make some hypotheses. But so you have access to this, but you don't distinguish between like product and processes. You don't distinguish either with organizational and marketing eco-innovations, but you cannot do it with the data. But product and processes, Elliot and all, which he refers a lot, do it. You did not look at the intensity of such benefits. Oh, I mean, you can't because of the survey. And also, and this is, you could do it, is about the different sectors. Because for me, eco-innovating in fossil fuel industry is not the same as eco-innovating in, let's say, transport. So yeah, that's the main conclusion is that at the end, like labeling everything under eco-innovations kind of obscure the true environmental benefits of the social eco-innovations, and I'm going to tell just after why. So so here, and I think it is the main approach of eco-innovation in general, is that they are associated with green growth vision of the transition. The problem is that the importance of this is to say that, okay, if we introduce eco-innovation and it's bringing growth, we have to be sure that the reduction in material or impacts are faster than the growth we have, which in the measure of eco-innovation we presented, we don't know. It is the same if, like, for example, the firm is like just reducing by 1% or 50%, which for me poses a huge problem because it's not the same. And here we have another problem which could not really be seen in this survey, is the fact that we have something called the Jevons paradox or the rebound effect. And then we don't really know if the reduction, for example, because of the efficiency of the eco-innovation, this reduction are going to lead directly or indirectly to potential increase that at the end may counteract against this reduction. And so at the end you can eco-innovate, but because you produce more, you have 70% growth of employment, you pollute more, and then you are not eco-innovating at the end. So my question with this is, are eco-innovations? So that's something that was already said in Kemp and Foxen, who presented a paper measuring eco-innovations in 2007, and they said that, and this is the problem with declarative aspect of surveys, is that maybe firms don't even know themselves if their eco-innovations is decreasing their impacts, because they don't perform life cycle assessments of their in their value chain. So they can say, okay, yeah, reduce to be the energy, but are they talking about efficiency? Are they talking about cost per watt? It's for me, it's like really broad. And also, but Astou also mentioned about this, is because of this, we don't really know also if when they are eco-innovating, they are not shifting their ecological impacts other way, like for example in the global south, for example. So this is alternative, but so of how to measure eco-innovation. So maybe within the CISSE survey, and this is maybe also a question, I think it's my question for the end, is that maybe can be interesting to introduce this distinction between process and products eco-innovation, the different sectors maybe, and also the types of environmental benefits, to look at if is like energy decreasing, like energy savings more impacting that, I don't know, fossil fuel savings or whatever. Then, and this is also because I'm not a microeconomist and more macro/engineer level, whatever, I would be interested to have a look on what would be, for example, material and energy flows here, or as I said, which is more, maybe more fine with like firms' life cycle assessments. Of course, you wanted to look at labor, or at least at work condition and job quality and these kind of things. But I'm questioning here more about the ecological aspect, because if eco-innovations in the first place are not eco-innovations, can we measure the impact on job quality or on job creations? And yeah, on more macro scales, we can maybe also look at other indicators. I don't know how much good is this, it doesn't look so good, but for example, composite indicators of the EU Eco-Innovation Scoreboard, but something which can be more sectoral would be, for example, using environmental extended multi-regional input-output analysis that could include also how much is being displaced, for example, in the global south. That's good.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be talking about results and policy implications, and I presented you the results earlier. There's more coming. So, and just a little reminder again, we have seen that benefits mostly extend to the high-skilled workers and do not extend to senior workers and women, and low-skilled workers are much worse off. So, firstly, I want to tackle this whole dichotomy between low and high skilled, because I don't like it, because it's quite misleading, this distinction, because who are we calling low skilled? What is the intention? And it's mostly used in a pejorative way, so we need to look at the narrative and the story that is told with that. So firstly, low skilled workers are mostly migrants, working class, racialized groups. And this skill classification does not really reflect institutional and political narratives, but not the actual capabilities. Let's take a person migrating to France with this degree in medicine that is not recognized. So the person is forced to work in a low-skilled job, but is actually pretty skilled, but that's not recognized at all. So this inequality stems from a precarity and restricted rights of the workers, and not actually from a lack of skills. And to the other side, there's also the tendency of firms to substitute high-wage workers with low-wage workers. So let's take, for example, a person with a degree in education that is not recognized, so they have to work in a low-skilled job with a low-skill wage. And firms will actually prefer that, because the person has the education, but they don't have to pay for the education. So in general, jobs are changing very fast, and faster than formal skill classifications can even catch up. And the key question we should ask ourselves here is, are people actually low skilled, or are jobs structured to be low paid and insecure? So then let's have a look at gender inequality in green jobs. So we've seen that the structural barriers persist despite the innovation. And that's due to underrepresentation of women in the green innovation sectors, and you've counted a few reasons why that is. But also reproductive and care work remains largely invisible and not taken into account when talking about it. And this is mostly because gender considerations are often treated as some kind of add-on and not a core element of the policy. And the ILO would even agree with me that a sustainable green economy requires legal and material gender equality to be truly sustainable. And I've also put a quote of Littig, which is a pretty good paper I could recommend to you guys. And she stresses the connection between the decent work and the gender equality SDG, because the gendered perspective of work as a particular societal nature relationship is indispensable, since a working society without legal and actual gender equality cannot, in any case, be actually sustainable. So, yeah, let's look at the future of labor. And if we are talking about green jobs, it's mostly imagined as this very expert-led and well-paid job. but this is mainly applying to the energy sector and also only making up 6% of green jobs. Actually, most of the green jobs are found in very precarious sectors such as agriculture, construction and trade, and these are exactly the precarious sectors affected. So yeah, labor markets are becoming very fluid and flexible, but it's put on the workers to actually acquire the skills to keep up, while it should actually be the other way around, that workers should not have to adapt to the needs of the market, but the market adapts to the needs of the workers. And yeah, we do need the systemic change to do that. I will speed up a little bit, I'm sorry. So, policy implications. We do have to improve the conditions for precarious workers, which are labeled low skill, not male, old or older. And they need stronger labor protections, skill frameworks that recognize the background, the learning and job fluidity, and actually doesn't focus on this skill issue anymore, and integrate gender mainstreaming across all green job policies. And also this paper argues in favor of evaluating green jobs on a scale and not on a binary variable, if it's green or not, but how green is it actually, and what's the quality. So there's also a few transformative measures that could be considered, like job guarantee programs, reduction of working hours, and the overall redistribution of work to ensure a just transition for all that actually does leave no one behind. So yeah, let's go to our discussion. And we've prepared some questions for you.
Oh yeah, that's one question. I think that's the people here are going to ask the questions. We will only have questions for you, and mine was really about the method and maybe more about the choice in the paper. So I wanted to know, why did you choose to use this broad definition of eco-innovations by merging product and process, and as well as the different environmental benefits within the same measure.
And my question is a little provocatively formulated, but is the implementation of eco-innovation actually going to be sufficient to save our planet? And yeah, please tell us what role you give eco-innovation in this whole problem.
I guess my question is not better. It says, like, your analysis focuses on the firm level outcomes in the global north. Well, do you see a risk that eco-innovation-led transitions in these economies could shift environmental burdens to the global south through resource extractions and upstream pollution? And how might this affect the interpretation of eco-innovation as a driver of just transition?
So first, it's impossible to examine the details in this kind of paper. So it's a very broad question, but it's a super interesting one. Let's say I'm well aware that there are like some super important debates about degrowth. Let's admit that for this kind of paper, degrowth is just another question. Again, the question, one of the questions with degrowth is the issue, the problem of possible backlash. Okay, so at least if at some point green transition means really more poverty and so on, you've got this risk of like backlash against the ecological transition. But once again, it's not something that I can discuss in this kind of paper, but I'm well aware of this. I would say that the main point is that I cannot see, let's say, let's be a bit more, I cannot see how come there can be something as a energy or green transition without efforts from private firms to limit their impact on environment. I cannot imagine that, okay? So at some point, if we want to have something that looks like a green transition, firms have to take their responsibility, and in my mind, this responsibility is like at some point innovating with the objective or consequence of limiting environmental damages. So, but having said that, I'm absolutely convinced that it's, so let's say it's a necessary condition, green innovation for the transition, but it's absolutely not enough or not sufficient condition. There is also for sure a deep responsibility of the state. I mean, in charge of public interest through like, not green innovation in this case, through norms, taxes and so on. There is also a deep responsibility in this transition for like consumers, you, me, in the way we commute, in the way we consume and so on. Okay, so it's a shared responsibility, and from the firm side, at some point it should come as something with like green innovation. So that will be my answer. I don't know if it's convincing, but now, Marceau, you're absolutely right. You could say one of the limits of the paper is that indeed we have a rather broad definition, even a 0-1 definition of eco-innovation. Yes, it's true, but it's related to what we try to do. So we try to measure the effect of eco-innovation on something that is job quality for various types of workers. So what we look at is have multiple dimensions. So it becomes somehow very difficult, okay, to have to take into account the. I totally agree with you, the heterogeneity of eco-innovation, and then, okay, to consider the relationship with something that is also multidimensional, like job quality. Even so, I would see this kind of paper as really a first step. Okay, and probably the next generation of papers dealing with the outcome from a micro perspective, the outcome of green transition and employment, those papers, the next generation will have to consider this heterogeneity. Absolutely, it's absolutely necessary. I'm well aware that under the category of green innovation, we have things that are for sure very different. So, so for instance, about the difference in product and process. So we try to exploit this information. Not so easy. It's very difficult because it's so interrelated, and most firms do declare, in fact, at the same time, product and process innovation. So, well, it was kind of messy here. Okay, but yeah. I totally agree with the necessity to go beyond and to look at differences across sectors and so on, and also to consider the types of environmental benefits. It's yeah, but I would say maybe for a next paper. If I'm not sure it's a very good answer. Regarding the macro outcomes, for sure it's important, but it's I would say it's I'm getting a bit old to start with macro now, so it's up to your generation to do that. So regarding I think that some of the comments by Elu were about green jobs. Yeah. So it's an important point. I don't know if it's not so, maybe not clear enough in the paper. There is indeed some research, literature about green jobs. But finally, and the PhD by LADYSS is, there are a couple of chapters about green jobs, but if you look really at green jobs, it's quite limitative, in fact. And depending on the measure you adopt, it's possible to have just like country like France to have just 1%, 2%, or 3% of green jobs. So finally, we come with the idea that if we want to understand once again somehow the effect of, let's say, green transition on labor market dynamics, focusing just on green jobs would be super limitative. So what we believe here, the idea of the paper is that precisely efforts by private firm will have very broad consequences for every types of jobs. Green jobs for sure, but also, well, very different jobs that are not green or brown, just regular jobs. So once again, the idea is indeed to go beyond this quite restrictive category of green jobs, which is it is an interesting category, but it's very limitative. Probably too limitative for what we try to do and to have a global idea of the dynamics of labor markets. And well, finally, it's I would say probably agree on the limitation of the category I use to define labor, high skilled, low skilled. Yes, you're right. But let's say that at some point, if those categories, high skilled, low skilled workers, are very common in economics, and there is a sort of trade-off here. If we want to be heard, if we want to be read, if by the community of researchers in economics, socioeconomy, and so on, at some point we have chosen to adopt the classical category. And I mean, probably also you will agree with me, it would have been very dangerous in this case with the data we have to speak about migrants, racialized workers, because basically we don't have any information on that. So we prefer in this case to use very standard category. Even so, you're right, they are not neutral. I do agree with that. Yep. But yeah, it's no. Yeah, why not? You're right. You're right. It's yeah, it's a good remark, and it's not. Finally, maybe you're right. Okay, it's absolutely possible. It should have been possible to redraft the whole article using low-skilled jobs instead of low-skilled workers. Okay, it might make a difference. I understand the point. Yep. Yeah. It might be a good one. Ouais, je crois que j'ai déjà répondu. Sorry, those questions are so important, and well, it's.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I'm Nicolau from Spain, and I studied also in Paris IDE. I wanted to ask you because, as far as I understand, like the sample of firms is all sectors confused, right? I mean, there is not a proper distinction in between sectors. I mean, do you think a proper distinction of sectors will make more sense? Because, for example, for me, it's hard to, when we talk about these kind of practices, when we, for example, the case of tourism, that it's very, I mean, talking from Spain, of course, I mean, you will have green tourism or these kind of practices that are actually not very eco-innovative, because you still need usage of land, you still need of usage of natural resources. Maybe you just outsource where you do this tourism, but the practices are more or less the same. And it's hard to check all these while talking about industry, services, financial services. I mean, I don't know. Can you maybe give some insights on that? Thank you.
We take 2 or 3 questions, and then.
Hi, I'm Jonas from Switzerland. I would like to ask a bit more of a fundamental question, but I think it's important because I would kind of question this whole research strand on the just transition and so on, because I think what is quite often forgotten, or very often we talk about, okay, there's this famous call by trade unions that there are no jobs on a dead planet and so on. But I think what is really fundamental to the ecological crisis is the whole concept of wage labor, right? The alienation from what you're producing, that even kind of created this conditions like this has very been long ago. There have been a lot of studies into this already 100 years ago, and nowadays too, oil rig workers and so on, really being not they don't directly identify with their product, and then very often they actually have mental health issues and so on because they see the impact from it. And so, and then especially when we're talking of will this transition create new jobs, or will jobs be lost? Isn't that the wrong question in the core? And it's more in the end, like, okay, we want to have like a decent life and so on. This needs to be produced by certain people. But there's also this other kind of level where people identify with their job. I like that those both things exist. And then the question is more like kind of how should society be organized in that sense? And instead of like just like, okay, will there be also wage labor in the future?
Or you take the two questions and then. Okay. Okay. You take the two questions and then.
But there was also the question by Astou. Obviously, it's a very important one about what do we expect on Global South. It's I'm unable to answer with this kind of paper, let's say. So yeah, but obviously it's a really an important one, and at some point, if you want to enter this one, you have to go with like global value chain and so on, subcontracting. Yeah. So, but this is really something we cannot do with this sort of a paper. Yeah, the question on industries. Yeah, we have the information about the sector, the industry, and yeah, you're right. Probably it's important to make to look at the differences across sectors. We do so in the paper just by we make the distinction between a brown sector that directly contributes to like high carbon emission and so-called environmental activities. So we use a definition by Eurostat, and that's one way to deal with the industrial heterogeneity. And well, job creation are like more important in this is something that was expected, but is more important in sectors that are really at the forefront of the green transition. So in a sense, it's rather good news. But yeah, we can probably do more here. Now, regarding the question on fundamentally about like wage labor nexus and the way we should think about production in our economies, I also agree with you at some point, but you probably should consider also the case that, I mean, there are people, if you take the French case, you've got 90 million of people that are wage earners that do work in private firms, and those people are really interested by like job creation, job destruction, by the level of wage, and trade unions are definitely super interested by the way they can like providing decent labor conditions for these people. So I mean, I'm not ready for the moment to just skip away all this basic reflection about where do we go with those efforts by private firms. They are like for sure not enough, but a significant share of firms try to cope with the environmental damages. What shall we expect for like regular workers, for people that do work in private firms? And well, trade unions are obviously really interested by those questions. So just transition is not really an academic concept. It's coming more from trade unions, and well, I do work a lot with trade unions, and this kind of paper is also to provide them with hard evidence, basic evidence. So yeah, but also I do agree with you that at some point, not in the paper, we need to have a broader reflection on where we go, how to produce, and so on. Yeah, totally agree with that.
I'm Eugenia from El Salvador. Thank you for your presentation. Maybe my question is more related to the methodology part. I don't know if you already clarified it and maybe I missed it. But you showed that the employment levels before and after the implementation of the eco-technologies didn't change significantly. So I wonder whether it's because there is like an a process where the policies in France were so successful that they achieve a correct or transformation, that these people was able to transition to the new employments generated with these technologies, or is because there's an entry of a new skilled labor force because there are a lot of young people training in new different programs, so they have these new opportunities. I don't know if you compare this with the unemployment levels to see whether this is the creation of new employment. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm Daniela from Colombia. My question is somehow related to something we discussed in your class about the business case when we talk about gender inequality. Isn't this a double-sided sword that could play against the just transition? Because if the results were that there is a negative relation or that if there is less employment, wouldn't this create a kind of fear towards the just transition? And the just transition, wouldn't it be a means and an end on itself instead of having to be reinforced through something like this, which could actually play against it?
Hello, I'm Ben from India. I do have a question which is sort of resonating with the discussants, which talks about how you define eco-innovation and, let's say, using patents as a proxy for eco-innovation, or even declarative approach that was mentioned in your paper. But then I was just wondering, if not for patents or a declarative approach, what are the other alternatives that we have in order to evaluate eco-innovation? Asking this also because I was reading a report of eco-innovation for one of the projects where what European Commission does is that in order to evaluate eco-innovation, they look into the websites of these firms and look for keywords which sorts of says if there is any eco-innovative words that they use in their website, and they use that as a proxies in order to evaluate eco-innovation. And there's also the fact that the countries which has higher level of patenting which related to eco-innovation doesn't necessarily have a high sustainability index. So I just want to know the alternatives for eco-innovations. Thank you.
Okay. For the first question in terms of methodology, we are using microdata, firm level data. So it means that we are unable to have any conclusion about the success globally of like French public policy toward the green transition, or the arrival of new generation of workers with the proper skills and so on. Rather, that's the idea of the methodology. We look at differences across firms, and in particular whether or not they have innovate. And what we see is that when firms do try to limit the environmental impact of their activity, well, it has some consequences on labor, some consequences that we do not see on firms that have just not innovate. So this is really the idea. So yeah, not possible with this kind of design to have broad conclusion about what's going on in France. And really the idea is to look at differences across firms, considering their behavior in terms of green innovation. Il y avait the second question was, yeah, sure. It's a very difficult one, but a very important one. Well, the business case argument regarding gender inequality is to say basically, well, if you put more women on your board of directors, for instance, then you will increase the performance of your business. That's a classical argument, a claim that you hear everywhere, okay? And as we discussed in our seminar, it's sort of dangerous, okay? Because, as I told you, I consider that gender equality should be supported for itself, irrespective of its consequences in terms of performance and so on. Okay, that's the business case argument. Here, it's slightly different in the sense that I'm not claiming. I didn't start the seminar by saying that, well, the green transition or eco-innovation is going to create jobs. I'm not saying that. Okay. But also I'm not claiming that it will destroy. Okay. I'm ready to hear the two. Okay. But I start with the premise that the green transition will happen or not, but it's absolutely necessary. I mean, whatever the consequences. I mean, that's the starting point. But I think if we want to succeed somehow with this green transition, we have to consider, to examine, to take into account how it will affect people in their current lives, in particular in their employment. So in any case, I'm not at all supporting the idea or claiming that a green transition should be made if it's good for jobs or something like that. I'm just trying. Here's the message: is just to say that what you can see in the French situation, but again, okay, we're aware that we are not considering global south here, and that might be side effects. So irrespective of these possible very damaging side effects on global south, for the moment, what we see that efforts by private firms to cope with the green innovations are not destroying jobs, at least for the moment. But there are various effects on various types of workers. So there is really a warning, okay, in terms of possible new inequalities. And well, now it's the role of public policy and so on, trying to limit those inequalities. So there is no business case argument here. Finally, yes, you're absolutely right. There are other possible definitions. I saw definitions of eco-innovations using, for instance, green R&D. So you try to collect words about the way firms did R&D expenditures. Okay, when they claim a tax credit, for example. So it's one way to measure. There are green patents. There are absolutely what you said, measuring green innovations through search, word search on websites and so on. I mean, at some point you've got a lot of proxies for eco-innovation. I'm not saying that mine is better than others. I mean, I think that in another paper, let's try with with this possible definition, and what I like in the Italian paper, the way that they try to, the way they correlate a declarative measure with a more patent-based measure, and at least it gives you the idea that if you take a restrictive approach, the problem you will have is that eco-innovation won't mean anything. I mean, there are so few firms that are able to apply for new green patents and so on. So obviously it's very important. But if you do that, you will miss the efforts made by, well, I would say the whole population of firms to cope with the actual. So yes, this is declarative. I'm aware of that, but at least we capture something.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation, and also thank you very much for the 3 discussants for the presentation. And I definitely want to put myself behind a lot of their arguments, especially in terms of the bigger picture and the vision of the green transition, which is portrayed here. But we've been talking about that a little, so I'm gonna go a little bit more into methodology, because I'm also quite skeptical. I'm sorry, I have to go into that again, but I'm also quite skeptical of the self-declarative measure of innovation, and I have some points which I want to make. The first one is that if you look at this IPR versus self-declaration and see that there's a big difference between the two, how are you sure that you can use this as an argument that the declarative one is the more precise one? Couldn't you also just say that in the fact that there's very little patents, you see that the declarative one would rather like be firms overestimating their impact while actually only doing like a very little amount of patents. The second point is about the sectoral or the sector difference, which Marceau pointed about. I think it's like a very big point because like I think to me it's very necessary to recognize the need of certain sectors that just need to stop producing at some point, like certain fossil sectors. And as Marceau said, like those are probably the sectors which are greenwashing a lot, which are declaring a lot of like ecologically sustainable innovations, and therefore a big part is like, in my mind, couldn't it be that a big part of the eco-innovate or the firms which you declared as eco-innovators are in fact fossil firms, which shouldn't be recognized in this because in an actual vision of a green transition they shouldn't really exist anymore. And maybe the last one is on the difference between regulatory driven and proactive eco-innovations. I'm also wondering if this is also a self-declared measure, and if yes, isn't there a danger for bias from firms who probably don't like regulations that much and therefore declare innovations that led to more employment as proactive, because then they are like, yeah, okay, no, that's something which we did if it worked out, and if it didn't work out, then they are like, oh no, but the regulations, the bad, they drove us to do that, and like, doesn't this all like just impact the results a lot and make them like very hard to interpret? Thank you.
Okay, there's one there, and I think it will be the last. Okay, réponds.
Sorry, because I'm really exhausted. So no. Yes, I understand the point about declarative versus non-declarative approach. Let's say that again, it could be the case that the true measure is the non-declarative, and that we are like way overestimating green innovation. Yes and no. Once again, it depends what you mean and what you want to capture with eco-innovation. Once again, it's not a legal concept, so it's really eco-innovation is what you put in it. I mean, and I would say if you consider, I mean, the vast number of case studies, observations. I mean, let's consider the French case. You've got a number of firms that do replace, firms that have a fleet of thermic cars, and they do replace this fleet of thermic cars by electric cars. Okay, so there is no patent here, absolutely no patent. At some point, okay, it is in a sense, if they do that for the first time, it is an innovation, and it will, at least at the user's level, it will limit carbon emission. So this is a kind of even small innovation we will hopefully capture with a declarative approach, something you cannot capture with the patent approach. Even so, I'm well aware of the danger of overestimating, and you're right, probably greenwashing. So maybe it calls for a more precise. We should probably make more effort, and indeed looking at green innovation, in particular bronze sector, fossil sector, would be a good idea, just to see what's going on, what do they declare here, or yeah. But you're right. You're right. The second question, yeah, the second question, just one thing. Yes, innovation here is absolutely declarative because we use the surveys. So managers are asked about the drivers, the main driver or motivation for the innovation. So regulation, tax, and so on, norms. But the thing is, regarding employment, there is nothing declarative. Okay. On the employment side, nothing is declarative. I mean, these are the absolutely true data. These are the administrative data on the number of workers in the firm, number of new hiring, and so on. So, I mean, it's not possible for, there is nothing declarative in labor data. So you cannot think that like managers will try to greenwash everything, saying that, yes, we green innovate and we create jobs. There is no question about job creation. So we have the proper data on job creation. But yes, for greenwashing, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Very last question.
Hi, my name is Nikhil and I'm your former student. I love the paper and congratulations for this. I have 3 points that I am very curious about. Very small. One is the timeline. So you're basically saying that if the firms use innovations between 2018 and 2020, whether it had an impact by the year 2021, are there any lags are you considering in innovations, because capital expenditure requires a lot of time for showing results? Maybe there are some biases in the results because of that, one. Second, I wanted to check, since you touched briefly on the inequality, that high income bracket or high paid job versus low paid job. Thanks for the vocabulary. You briefly talk about the wealth distribution. So I'm curious, since you talk about in the last final table, you basically draw a table for employment. Have you considered the impact on profitability of these innovations? Are these eco innovations impacting profitability better than non-eco innovations? And in most cases in corporate governance, most of these high salaried managers, they have incentives, financial incentives, profitability related incentives related to innovations, and maybe these green transitions are adding towards their incentives in their salaries because of innovating on green stuff. In some companies, executive salaries linked to ESG KPIs, which is environment. And the third part, sorry, I've written it. The third part was on the negative results of regulation. Bank of France published a working paper in May using 14 years of data from Spain, and it shows exactly the opposite. They said that the effects of regulations were extremely positive on eco-innovations and eco-innovation profitability. So maybe just a word on that if you've considered their literature. Sorry.
Okay. No, okay. No, for regarding the second question, it's probably super important, but I would say so the effect and the relation of those innovation with return profitability, it's absolutely crucial, because if it is the case indeed that those eco-innovation have a very low return, it might be another problem for the green transition. I'm well aware of that. I'm also working on that, but it's in a sense it's outside of the paper. It's a super important question. But then the question is, but it's really another debate, how to limit the financial pressure, short-term effect, financialization on firms, sort of financialization that may hamper or limit the efforts of firms to limit their environmental damages. So it's an important question, but a different one, and I can talk about this one for hours, in fact, because I'm also working at that. The first question is very important. We have the data we use on employment are in the 31st of December for 2021. So it's about 1 year and a half, let's say 1 year and a half, at least after the innovation. So it's quite a short measure. I'm absolutely aware of that. But at the time we started the paper, and we were limited. So the data for employment in 2022 were not available. It might be the case now, but this sort of paper, it's like 3 years of like collecting data and merging everything and so on. So I would say that indeed it would bring something to the paper if we were able to look at to have more a larger time span. You're right, absolutely. It's not the case here, but and finally there was another question, but okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.